Pints in a Corner is a music history podcast about the Channel Club in Boston, Mass. Dinky Dawson and Tony Raine are your hosts. They interview channel performers and workers, bringing out stories and memories of the great music and events that came through this iconic South Boston venue. On my history, before I get into Atlantic's history and you and what was going on, July 8th, 1972 is 54 years ago today that I started Dawson Sound Company in Lennox, Mass with Mahavishnu Orchestra playing. And that sound system is what came in the channel in 1984 after you guys had finished and what have you. But then it stayed in there till the end, which is until after,
1990 or so?
1991, I think it was, when we had to pull everything out. 91 on towards 92. But anyway... whose system was it before that? Was it Peter or something? What's his name? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Peter, what is his name?
Agnew or something, or I can't think of his last name.
Yeah, that's a good one. But you were in there so early. You really... Because the Atlantics were such an incredible band in the late 70s, and then in early 80, and then you played so many times. You played 19 times, actually. Sean had 20, but I made one October 24th. I double did it, October 24th, 1980. I did it twice in the database, so I made a mistake. But anyway, let's get down to it. This is Fred Pineau. You have to say it correctly. I am always wrong with names.
It's okay. It's Pineau.
Pineau. Oh, that's right. Okay, and this is the Atlantics. But first of all, let's start it off like we normally do. And welcome to 2 Pints in a Corner with Tony Raine and Dinky Dawson. Tony is still recuperating down on the Cape. And Sean's been with me for the last few months and doing a marvellous job. And he knows all you guys because he's still playing or still doing stuff. And he's promoting and still promoting people as well. And I am so happy that he's on here. So thank you, Sean. And now we have Fred P. There you go again. from the Atlantics. I'm going to start with one thing. I checked you out this morning on the Google. Put in Atlantics Boston band. Well, the first thing that came up was Wikipedia. It didn't come up as a Boston band. Atlantics, but it was an Australian band.
That's right. There was a surf band in Australia called the Atlantics.
That's the one. Surf. He did surf. That's it. Anyway, after that, before that, you were not in the band earlier. The guitarist was a different gentleman. But let you start with Sean, because you and him have had a long talk. And with that information, I think Sean's the best to do all this again for us. There you go, Sean.
Well, thank you, Dinky. Thanks for joining us there, buddy. I do appreciate you. Give us some time.
Yeah.
Essentially, let's start by, first of all, this is an anniversary for Dinky as well, though, Dinky. Tell us about how long Dawson Sound has been around, so to speak.
54 years ago today. Because you and I...
Wow.
I basically, after the channel, I put it in the channel because I was getting tired of touring with the equipment in that particular section around the world. We toured so many times all over the place. Plus, we played a lot of New England dates with different people at colleges for Howie Cusack and people like that. And, it was the time. It was the time when people were really evolving in Boston in the late 70s, even though I'd been here with Fleetwood Mac in 1968, the tea parties and stuff, the old tea party upstairs and then the new one. But the bottom line is that I left the Byrds at that time period just to start this sound company because I was so disappointed with all the sound systems that we were using, except my WEM from England. But I couldn't do really big gigs with the WEM without adding stuff. So I decided with an engineer out of Boston called BG to make a sound system that was a music reproduction system, nothing to do with PA. There is not one speaker in there that's not everyone's used in hi-fi. There's not one PA speaker in the whole place. I did put them in later for the vocal system, which was a separate system too, you know. But the bottom line is in stereo. I had an opportunity with the musicians from Mahavishnu to go out all the way through 73 and Lou Reed with 73. That's when I added the vocal system as well. And it would go well. I mean, my horns that I built travelled with 1 watt to 25 miles. They were 81 inches long, 41 inches wide, and I had 4 of them. And you get in front of them,
wow.
you could be absolutely devastated. We drowned.
Well, it's an impressive anniversary. Another legend for 54 years. Well, big congratulations for that, Dinky. It's amazing how long you've been in this business. We talk about a lot of people on these podcasts where it's like we're impressed with what they've done, but really we ought to look back to what you've done over the years. It's pretty an amazing career, and here's to many, many more. You're in the music business, so you can pull up one of his. He has a book actually he did with Cutter Allen several years ago called Life on the Road. The Incredible Rock and Roll Adventures with Dinky Dawson. And so, yeah, essentially, he's one of the first guys to bring his own PA on the road with some pretty big bands. And then that system ended up in the Channel when Dinky kind of decided to settle down, get off the road, and come to Boston. And that was in '84. So the great sound system that people played on at the Channel from '84 on till it closed, you have Dinky Dawson to thank. So, Dinky, thank you for that. And obviously, you have some incredible stories out there. So, thank you for all of us. You had a chance to show at the Channel. It was all you're doing with that great sound. So thank you for that, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's go back to what we originally were doing. Is talking about the Atlantics.
Yes.
I really enjoyed.
We have Fred Pineau with us. Fred's lead guitarist in the Atlantics, and Atlantics. I'm sure many people who are listening to this will remember as being one of the really biggest Boston bands in the early '80s. Certainly had some memorable gigs at the Channel, among other places. But before we get to that point and what Fred's been up to for the past several decades, let's go back to the very beginning, if you don't mind, Fred, and give us a start, like where you grew up, how you kind of have music come into your life, so to speak, and who you first kind of fell in with as far as the kind of music you wanted to do, and blah, 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 blah. But give us a little bit backstory on how you kind of get into the business in the first place or became, in the music scene.
Sure. I come from a show business family. My father was an entertainer. He was born in 1900 and went into vaudeville in 1917, and he never looked back. He performed right till the time he died in 1964.
I love it.
So I grew up with live. What?
I love it.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up with live music in my living room all the time. Wednesday nights were rehearsal and audition night. His band would set up in our living room, and this procession of performers, everything from comedians to jugglers to singers to dancers, you name it, they came through there. So I grew up watching all that, but I never wanted to get involved with it myself until 1962 when I heard Rumble by Link Wray and the Raymen.
Yeah. Oh,
and I decided I really would like to play that, make that sound on the guitar. And for 2 years, I just sort of dabbled with the guitar. I didn't really play it. And then I saw the Beatles. And then it was game over. I saw the Beatles and said, I want to be them. And so I really sort of buckled down. But it took, I taught myself. My father, God bless him, tried to teach me. I'm a terrible student. I taught myself, so it took a while, but I was really passionate about it. And so my high school years were spent pretty much in my bedroom with my guitar. And then I got out of high school and I began playing in bands. And that was in the late 60s. So once you turned the corner into the early 70s, music began changing. And, I tried to change with it. We had bands, but we only play. I always wanted to write my own songs. I never wanted to just play cover songs. And, some of the early efforts, of course, were abysmal. But, eventually I developed into what now in my old age I consider to be a pretty good songwriter. So that was sort of the arc of how I got involved in music.
Interesting. So I'm curious, like you mentioned, the idea that you didn't want to do covers, you want to just do originals. And of course, back then, there really wasn't a lot going on as far as original music, save for the big stars of the world are all over the place. But as far as like having that mindset from the early part of your music career, so to speak, Fred, like I'm just kind of curious, was it just kind of a thing where it's like, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing, or you just didn't want to, did you do covers for a little while, decided I don't want to do this anymore? Like, how did you kind of in that mindset where I don't want to do covers, or do my own stuff and do my own songwriting and my own guitar playing?
Well, it was a part of it was that the Beatles, when I started really, I became a real Beatlemaniac, and they wrote their own material. I mean, they did a lot of covers too, because they were at the beginning they were just hung over from their days in Hamburg, but they wrote a lot of their own material, and I said I want to do that. I want to be like them, and I began looking into who their influences were. So I began listening to Little Richard and to Elvis and to Jerry Lee Lewis and all of these performers, and fell in love with them. But one of the things, I was a record fanatic. I collected records. And one of the things I really loved were bands that were counterculture. And I remember buying the first Velvet Underground album and putting it on. And it was just a revelation to me that you could write songs about things that nobody else was writing about. Everybody was writing love songs and different things like that. And Lou Reed was writing love songs to heroin. And, I just said to myself, my God, he's my hero. If you can do that, you can do anything. And so that bands like that and the Stooges, when they came out, really were inspirations to me, because when they first came out, they became legiondary. But until the mid-'70s, they were persona non grata. Their records didn't sell well, and people, not that many people would go see them comparatively, but they became my heroes. I said, these are guys in the trenches. They're doing what they want to do. They're going to die on that hill. They're going to get up on that hill, and they're going to say, this is who I am, and this is my music. And that's what sort of fueled me and sort of gave me the inspiration to say, even though I'm I put together an original band, and we're only getting one gig every 3 months, it's still what I want to do. And that was the thing that fueled my passion or my fire to write my own material.
That's great. That's good stuff. And then I know that you mentioned how you saw, I think you were 14, when you saw the Beatles. And it's funny how many of our interviews on these podcasts have been influenced by the Beatles. It's like it just like flipped the switch to people. It's like, oh my God, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. That can actually happen. That's where I want to head my life in the music world, right? We're still, which is great. And then as far as like, I know you were like a high school kid at that point. You said at one point you were kind of insecure with your own playing and whatnot, but you also got married quite young after high school, and then you started your own band. I think it was like the early 70s. You were saying how you started getting a band together. Again, you're on your own thing with writing your own songs, didn't want to do covers, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of take us to that point where you're out of school now, you're out of high school, so to speak, and you're getting your first band, and you're in the area. Like, you grew up in Brookline, right? So you're in the area already. So you were also there kind of, we'll get this a little bit later on, but you were really there at the very, very beginnings of the CBGB/rat scene, where playing original music became like an actual thing where clubs actually wanted to support that. So not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but kind of take us back to when you first started your first band in the early 70s, Fred, and then how that led to what we just talked about.
Sure. Before I do that, real quickly, let me just tell you the first time I ever saw a live rock band, because that was a moment in my life too. In 1964, when I was a freshman in high school, they would have a yearly concert, and the concert that year was the Kingsmen, the guys that did Louie Louie. Yeah. And the opening act was the Remains, who were a legendary Boston band. And they were still to this day one of the best live rock and roll bands I ever saw. And they came on, because I had seen the Beatles, but they came on and started playing live. And halfway through the first song, I said, okay, now I get it. That's how you do it. And I began following them around. And of course, I was a 14-year-old kid following them around, but they were always very nice to me. And
Awesome.
and that was a big influence for me, is seeing live rock and roll for the first time. And the next year we had the McCoys as the headlining band. So it was just a wonderful thing. But anyway, going back to the early 70s, I had been playing with different people, again, it was hard to do because you're trying to do original music. And, in the early 70s, 71, 72, I was in a band with John Havorka, who later founded the Turbines.
Yeah.
And he was the bass player actually in the band. And we had a band for a couple of years. And then I started a band called, the first sort of band that I felt correlated was a band called Automatic Slim, and that was probably 73. And John Havorka was in that band as well. He was the bass player in that band as well. And that was what I considered to be a really good band. I thought the original songs were worthy, but we were going through the same thing. We were having trouble getting shows. When we got shows, we'd pull into a club, they'd want to hear Color My World by Chicago or something like that. And obviously we weren't about to do that. We were playing Roadrunner by the Modern Lovers. And, so it was difficult. As a matter of fact, we played a high school dance where the person who booked the gig had a cover band going in there. And then at the last minute, he pulled them out and shoved us in there. And they had no idea we were an original band. So when we left the club, we had to drive down this long road that led out to the street, and they were waiting for us, the kids. they were blocking the road and waiting for us. And I don't think that they wanted to shake our hands. But we just sort of hammered it and got past them. And, but those were the exciting adventures of being an original band in the early 70s. Right. So we... Automatic Slim eventually broke up, and then I formed. I went into another band. I was actually in a band for a few years with Joe Viglione, during that period, when the band broke up, Joe began recording his own music, and that was the first time I was ever in a recording studio. I was doing that, helping him out. But then I formed a band called Bonjour Aviators. And that was like the first real band that caught traction as an original band. And the reason it did was because we had our drummer was one of the later drummers for Blue Cheer. And the other guitar player who played keyboards as well, his name was Kim Preston, grew up with Richard Lloyd from television in New York City. And so like this is 1975, and we're going through the same thing. We're having trouble getting shows. So all of a sudden, Kim says, hey, I got a call from Richard Lloyd. He said, there's a scene down there now. It's at a club called CBGB's. And there's another club called Max's Kansas City, and they're booking all these original bands, and he can get us a gig there. So we started driving down to New York City to play at CBGB's in Max's Kansas City. The very first show we did at CBGB's, we opened for Talking Heads.
Wow.
And we ended up doing a lot of great shows down there. We opened for television a few times because we knew Richard. We were on the bill the first night that the Dead Boys ever played there. We got to do a lot of great things, a lot of great New York bands, Tough Darts. That was back when Robert Gordon was their singer. A lot of great bands down there, and it was a wonderful scene. It was thriving, and we had nothing like it in Boston at that time. So it was a lot of fun hanging around down there. And I tell this story often. The first night we played there, I'm playing, and I'm like halfway through the guitar solo, and I look out from the stage, and 6 feet away from me is Debbie Harry, and she's dressed to the nines. I mean, she looks stunning, and I lost my place in my song. because I just kept staring at her, going, "My God, she's beautiful." And and after we played, she and Chris Stein were there together. After we played, we went and they hung out. They came over to us and we hung out at the bar for a while together. And you just run into all these people there. The members of the Ramones that we were wandering in and out, and different people. So it was a lot of fun. And Max's Kansas City was.
Those are some incredible bands you mentioned already. I mean, never mind Talking Heads, but the Dead Boys' first time playing CB. That's incredible to be on those kind of bills. But I think you were saying you guys think you may have been Bon Jovi might have been the first Boston band to play down at CB's.
I think so. I think we were. I mean, I may be wrong about that, but if anybody else played down there, I'm not aware of it. The only band I can think of that might have gotten down there was Fox Pass, because they were around at that time.
Having the Richard Lurker really didn't hurt. That's fantastic. What a great connection to have. And then you really got into there at the really early stages of the whole CBGB scene, sort of,
Well, and then it extended to Boston because, Patti Smith came up to Boston to play, and we got to open for her. And I tell another story. You tell me if I'm rambling. We brought Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers up to play their first gig in Boston, to play at the Rat on a Friday and a Saturday night. And I went down there the Friday, I was the first one there for sound check. And Jimmy was there, and he came over to me. It was summertime, and he came over to me and he said, "Listen," he said, "the city of Boston was in here. My AC isn't working." He said, "They told me if I can't fix it within 1 to 2 weeks, they're shutting the club down. And these 2 nights are going to be pivotal in whether I can keep the club open." I said, "Oh, great. No pressure."
No pressure.
Yeah. But it went really, really well. They came up, they were using our backline. They were using our drums and amps. And so they came up, and they were fantastic. And it was packed both nights. It was really, really great. That was really the beginning of the Rat doing the original stuff, right? Because I don't know if Jimmy had a connection with Hilly. I know he did it later on with Hilly at CB's, but it seemed like he decided I'm going to be the guy that's going to start doing original stuff in my club, and that really opened the door for not just you guys, the Aviators, but the whole Boston, so to speak, that really started shifting this live thing that was going on. The whole New York thing was kind of bleeding into Boston. You guys were really more of a New York band at that point, playing most of your shows down that way until Jimmy, decided to get the Rat going, and then you again were, at the forefront of the bands that played there in the beginning as well. Yeah, we were, and Jimmy told me when he first opened the Rat to original music. What he told me was, he said the Rathskeller had always booked cover bands. And he said he couldn't compete with Narcissus and the clubs across in the Kenmore complex. He said, "I can't compete with them. They hire all the top drawer cover bands. So I'm basically throwing a Hail Mary pass and trying this." So that was the reasoning he gave me for the reason he actually did it. And I remember, it was free to come in. You could just come in. And I remember at one point when the scene started to really catch on, I remember a couple of us went to him and said, "Jimmy, you got to charge a cover charge." And he goes, No, I don't want to screw it up. Everything's starting. I said, so he charged $1 for the cover charge, and business increased. And he went, "Oh," and at that point he became very enthusiastic.
That's a good story.
So, yeah. But the Rat was such a wonderful place, and it was, the carpet was smooth like linoleum from all the beer that had been spilled on it. I remember the first Christmas that he had opened a club up. He decided to throw a private party for just bands, and with nobody playing. And at that time, he didn't own a PA, so where all these band members of different bands are all down there. The place is full, and we're bored to tears. We just said, "Jimmy, we want to play." So everybody got in their cars and went to their rehearsal spaces or whatever, brought back equipment, and, we had basically an impromptu jam session with all these different people from different bands all over town.
Cool.
And yeah, there was a lot of wonderful things that happened there. It was a really, really cool place. I think in its own way, it was every bit as sort of kitschy as CBGB's. You know, and I say this all the time. Can I swear on this, or do you not swear?
It's all good.
Okay. Well, it was a shithole.
Yeah.
But it was our shithole.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the, and I think personally, and you know, I said this in that documentary, Life on the Other Planet. You know, I think that one of the petri dishes for really growing great bands is that it needs to be a hellhole. It needs to be someplace you go in and you know, it's this funk down there, you know, and that's I think part of what made it work. CBGB's, you know, the area that was in Bowery and Bleecker, I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. I mean, but you know, apartments were cheap and artists could rent them. And, you know, there was a lot of music and art that developed out of that whole thing. You know, Biscott and all these different artists came out of that whole thing. And it was because they could afford to live there. You know, now that's gone.
Yeah.
Right.
So
100%.
Yeah. So
you guys will also look into, I know the Aviators want to move up from that to your next band in a second, but you guys also released a 45 early on, which was really, I think, one of the first local bands to do that. And then that band kind of, you said, just kind of sort of petered out a little bit. And then you joined another Boston band, which you're known for a year, right?
Yeah, Third Rail. Yeah, I when the Aviators broke up, it was one of those deals where the band just really petered out, and it was just like somebody has to shoot the horse. So you know, you know, the band ended, and I didn't want to run a band again or be involved in that. So I heard Third Rail was looking for a guitar player. They were a really popular band at the time. So I went and talked to Richard Nolan, and you know, he gave me the gig. And for a year, I played in Third Rail,
Right.
which was again a good experience in the sense that they were getting good gigs, and it was a good band of musicians. They were all good musicians. So.
And I think the next you did musically was you had a 3-piece, and it's kind of funny how this ties into another channel friend of ours. So tell me how your next act, your 3-piece act, interacted with Johnny Barnes. So we all know Johnny Barnes very well.
Yeah, Johnny's a great guy. Well, after I left Third Rail, I quit Third Rail, and I was at kind of wit's end. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, so I called up a drummer and a bass player, and I believe it was Ricky Lucenter on drums, and Bob Desitals on bass, Desi on bass. And we just learned a couple of songs I did, and Johnny Barnes was doing a cancer benefit at the club in Cambridge. And I called him up and said, can I get a slot? And he said, sure. And he gave me like 4 in the afternoon. It was like from 1 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning. And so we get up on stage to play these songs, and we get halfway through the second song and the PA goes down. And I said, oh shit. You know, I have a 20-minute set here. I said, I'm going to lose my set unless, I said, the option B is we just jam it out. I said, well, let's just jam it out. So for like, you know, 10 or 12 minutes, we just jammed. And it ended, and I came off stage and I was seriously depressed. I said, this is not a good premiere for what I want to try to do. And B and Tom from the Atlantics were there. Now, when I was in Third Rail, we had opened a show for the Atlantics, and I loved them. I thought that they were amazing. And I knew that they were looking for a guitar player, but the guitarist they had, Jeff Locke, who was really a great guitarist, was more of a Berkeley-style player. He played scales and a lot of things like that. I'm a Chuck Berry, meat and potatoes kind of guy. So I didn't bother reaching out. And B and Tom were at the club, and they came up to me and said, can we talk? And they said, we'd like you to come down and audition. And I said, well, I'm not anything like the guitarist you have. And they said, yeah, we know that's the reason we want you to come down. So they had a revolving door of guitarists coming in and out. And I went down there. They gave me a cassette with like 5 songs to learn. I went down there and we played, and it was good. It wasn't magical, but it was good. And so I came away from that saying, "Oh, hey, at least I got to go down and audition." And they called me back and they said, "Come back again." I said, "Okay." So I went back again and auditioned again. Same deal. Went very well, but not magical. And I came out of that saying, "Okay, well, that's that." And then they called me again. And I went in the third time, and I said, we started playing, and it was going sort of the same way. And after about 20 minutes, I stopped everything, and I said, "Guys, can we just take a break and just talk?" And they said, "Okay." So we stopped for like 20, 25 minutes and just shot the breeze. And then when we picked up our instruments again, I have no idea what happened, but the pixie dust got sprinkled because we started playing. And I remember we in those days, we covered "Be My Baby" by the Ronettes. And there's a whole outro vamp on the song that they used to do. And we hit that outro vamp, and all of a sudden I did this octave thing. I started doing this little movement on the guitar with this octave thing, and everything just snapped into place. And from that moment on, it was just bing, bang, boom. It was like we were all one unit. And they
were, I have to interrupt for a minute, but at that point, the Atlantics are pretty much an established band in town. They had a management. They were playing gigs. Obviously, Jeff leaves the band. They're trying to keep things going to find the next new guy. But they did have one interesting stipulation if you were going to join the band. And what was that?
Yeah, I had to cut my hair because I had long hair. I looked like a member of Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green. I had really long hair, and so they said, "Yeah, if you're going to join the band, the only thing is if you get the gig, you got to cut your hair." I said, "Okay," and they said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "You won't believe how many guitarists we talked to who won't do that." Yeah, I said, and actually, I went through that with them later when we were replacing a drummer a few years later. We auditioned a guy who we auditioned. I can't even tell you how many drummers. We auditioned one guy that just snapped right into place. He was great, and he looked fantastic. He was kind of a short guy, but he had really long kind of that band Cinderella. He had that kind of hair.
Sure.
And we were on MCA Records at the time, and I remember saying to the guy, "Oh, it's fantastic. You're working out great. I think it's going to be fantastic." I said, "Of course, you're going to need to cut your hair because we have all these punky kind of haircuts, and we're sort of vintage clothes." And he went, "Well, I can't do that." I said, and I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Dude, we're on MCA Records. We just came in off the road with Roxy Music. Like, what's your problem?" And he wouldn't do it. So anyway, I experienced that myself. But I on the other hand, had no qualms at all about cutting my hair.
That's awesome. So now essentially the unit's in place. Atlantics at this point had already done a 45 with Jeff on guitar. So you guys you're a couple months into the band now, and then I think this one the record label started to sniff around, or ABC Records got involved. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I joined the band. I can't remember the exact sequencing of the timing on this, but I joined the band. And roughly 2 months later, we got a record deal. Now, in Boston at the time, when I joined the Atlantics, the Cars had already gotten their deal with Elektra, and they were in England making an album. So the scuttlebutt on the street was that the Atlantics were next. But of course, I was just so happy to be in a popular band that, for me, I was just like, hey, I'm good. But 2 months later, we got signed to ABC Records, and again, that was like a dream come true. It was like I'm on a major label now. Little did I know, but I was on a major label, and it was a lot like falling down the rabbit hole and ending up in Wonderland for me, because these are things I always dreamt about. And first I'm in a popular band, then we're down in New York City at the Hit Factory, at that time, one of the biggest recording studios in the world, recording songs. And, and initially they signed us to do a 45. So we did the 45. We hated the producer. And part of the deal was if they didn't release it within 60 days, we could bail on the deal. And they didn't release it within 60 days, so we bailed, and they freaked out. They completely freaked out. Apparently no one had ever done that. And we just said, no, up yours. We're leaving. So they ended.
The songs you guys recorded became staples. There's some of your, When You're Young and Big City Rock, which are some of your, part of your main repertoire of songs over the years. So those are two singles you did do for them on the 45. But again, the production, you hated the production on it, and they kind of let that window expire of 60 days. And you said, we're going to walk away. So then how did it go from that point?
Well, at that point, they said, okay, we can't let this happen. I think it was more of an ego thing with them. So they said, okay, well, we'll let you do an album. We'll sign you to a 5-album deal, and we said, okay. So, and then they said that we could agree on a producer. Well, we wanted Ed Stasium, and Ed was available, but they wouldn't agree to him. And so, but they weren't saying no, they just weren't saying yes. So it kind of went on and on and on. And 2 weeks before we were supposed to go in the studio, they finally said, okay, you can use Ed Stasium. Well, of course, Ed was booked on something else at that point. So we ended up with another one of their staff producers who we think did a lackluster job on the album. We were looking for somebody we wanted to sound like the Pretenders. And we ended up sounding like a mid-'60s band. So the sound quality just wasn't there. And so that's what happened. Then we went into the studio to do the album, and did the whole album. This is now we're looking at this is in the winter, November, December time frame you're recording it. And that's 78. 78. Where MC came in and took over ABC Records, correct? Yeah, what happened was we passed the first of the year and we got into the album was scheduled to come out in, I think it was late March, early April, and in late February, ABC got sold to MCA. We were nervous. We were just saying, we how is this going to shake out? Because the first thing MCA is going to do is they're going to cut their roster. They're going to get rid of people that they don't want. Right. And are they going to want us? Well, it ended up that MCA had really bought ABC for their country music artists, where they had a huge country music thing. But the three rock bands, or bands considered rock that they kept were Steely Dan, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and us. Now, somehow that happened. Don't ask me how, but that happened. And not only that, this is like one of those record label. Actually, the pixie dust actually worked in your favor, right? So the MCA gets involved, decides going to keep you guys, records coming out, and then at that point, you guys join the Roxy Music Tour, right? This is in the spring of '79, right before your record comes out. Yeah, what happened was MCA really embraced us. They really did, and they wrote a big check for us to go on tour. And we ended up with, as a client, a Premier Talent in New York, who I'm sure Dinky is well familiar with Premier Talent, who booked The Who and a lot of other big bands. And, we originally were offered Elvis Costello and the Attractions, which we were dying to do, but it was before the album was scheduled to come out. So they said, well, okay, well, how about Roxy Music? Let me, yeah. And we couldn't say yes fast enough. Right. So, so we went out with Roxy, and it was a grade A tour. We had a brand new tour bus that had never been used before. We went out and we were staying in upend hotels. MCA, I got to say, MCA really, they put a lot of money and effort into our tour. I wish they had put that into promoting the album, but they did put it into the tour. So I guess we have to be grateful for that. And for me, it was, again, it was like, falling down the rabbit hole, because I idolized those guys. Since their first album, I idolized them. We were touring on the Manifesto album. And so getting to meet them, and not only meet them, but over the course of the tour, getting to really know them was a real kick for me, Yeah, and you mentioned Brian Ferry was a big inspiration, and I definitely want you to talk about the story that he made a major influence on you. You in fact wrote a song based on that influence, and then you shared it with them. I want to hear that story, please. Yeah, when I was in Bonjour Aviators, we did a 45 And the A side of the 45 was a song I wrote called The Fury in Your Eyes. And it was based on, I loved his lyrics in the first two albums, especially because they were very abstract. They were almost Ali-esque. And I wrote it with that in mind. And, when I heard we were going to do the Roxy tour, I said, I really want to give him this record. And so we went out on the tour, and in Cleveland, they had the first sort of official tour party. They had a couple of small parties before that. And I brought the record with me down to the party, and I watched, and there was one point where he was alone, just standing in a corner, and I went over to him, and I at that point I had gotten to know him a little, and I said, "Hey, Brian," and I said, I explained the whole thing to him. I said, "You were really an inspiration to me." I said, I made this record with my band, and I'd like you to have it. I said, you can use it as a coaster. You can, feel free, whatever you need to do. I just want to give you the record and let you know that you inspired this song. And he said to me, I'm really flattered I could inspire you to write a song. And that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
He was just such a pleasant gentleman. He was a nice guy.
What a great memory. What a great story,
No,
that was I'm sorry, that was only equaled by the time I met Queen, where Brian May and John Deacon came to the Rat to see us.
Yeah.
And they were about to start their tour on the Jazz album the next night at the Boston Garden. They wanted to go out and see a band, and BCN said, you got to go see the Atlantics. So they went down and saw us, and we hung out after the show, and Brian and I really hit it off. We talked a lot of shop, and he said, you got to come down and see us tomorrow night. I said, I think we can pencil that in. And so we came down the next night. We watched their show. They were, of course, fantastic. And after the show, we were backstage with them just hanging out. And Brian pulls me aside, and he starts talking to me about the show. He said, so how did I sound on this, on Somebody to Love? I said, you sounded good. I mean, it sounded right. And he said, well, what about this song? What about that song? I said, Brian, what's going on? He goes, I wasn't happy. He said, and I said, I saw you going back to your amps all the time. He said, yeah. He said, I just didn't feel like I was in the pocket and blah, 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 blah. And he asked me about another song. I said, Brian, at this point, you've sold what, 20 million albums? I've sold 8. I said, I said, well, why do you care what I think? And he said something on one of my tombstone. He said, because I like your sound and I respect your opinion.
Wow. That's very nice.
Okay.
That's That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
wow.
I mean, and again, that's like something you'd see in a movie.
Yeah.
You'd see it in a movie and you go, that wouldn't have happened. But it happens.
Awesome. That's great stuff. And in this time frame, you do the Roxy tour, and then you guys doing some one-off shows. And then you mentioned you guys did some support for Robert Palmer, the Motels, Alice Cooper, a run with Squeeze, even a Boston date, the band Boston, Missing Persons. You did a bunch of area shows because the record's now out. You guys are really, really an established band in Boston and headlining. This again, now we're talking like late 70s, early 80s. You were playing the Paradise a lot, the Rat, and this kind of coincides with the Channel just starts coming into play here. Right? The Channel was 1980 when you guys are kind of at the peak of your power already. You're a big band at that point. The Channel opens, and you guys played your first show there in July
12.
of 80. And you guys were a huge act at that point already. But tell us about that first time in the Channel, and that became kind of like a home base to you guys over the years, of course. But I'm just curious that first memory going to the Channel and playing there.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, we went out on the road and toured with Cheap Trick on the Budokan tour. But anyway, that's just a footnote. But the Channel had opened, and we had heard about it, and we said, wow. And of course, we were on the road all the time. We were driving all over New England. There were times where we went farther out. We were on the road constantly. So we had just heard about it, and they said, "Oh, this is a good club. It's got good staging, good lights, good sound." And so the first time we went in, we were a little optimistic. We said, "Well, let's see how this works out." And we went in there, and we said, "Wow, these guys really have their act together. They really kind of know what they need to do to put on a great show." what the artist needs, in terms of staging and everything. So, and then, during sound check, we're looking out, we're going, oh, it takes a lot of people to fill this place, and we're going, oh, I hope we meet expectations. Well, we sold out. And, it was just a wonderful experience. My experiences at the channel in general are wonderful. The people who work there, we just had a really great time every time we played there.
Yeah, and you guys did it in Plymouth, I think it was 19 or 20 times, essentially, over the years. And you became instantly one of those local Boston bands that could sell at the channel, which was a big accomplishment in that time frame. Again, the channel, we're talking, 1,700 people. And for local bands to do that kind of business is just incredible when you think about it. So you were playing there almost every couple of 3 months, which was not unusual back then if you were a big enough band in town. And you could still play other venues in town, but the channel kind of became like the base for you guys, where you really kind of saw your biggest turnouts, obviously, and had some of your better shows over the years. And I know you mentioned a couple of crazy memories of the Halloween shows in particular. Maybe mention that if you don't mind.
The what show? I'm sorry.
The Halloween shows you've done?
Oh yeah, the Halloween shows are great. We would do them in costume. The first year I was the Road Warrior, and then the second year I was a priest. And I remember one year, our singer Bobby Marin one year was Robin Hood. I remember that. Tom, our rhythm guitar player, was a hedge one year. He actually was a hedge. So it was a lot of fun to do. And the people that came, there'd be a contest for the best costume, and we got to be the judges for the contest.
Yep.
So that was a lot of fun because people got really creative with their costumes. They had some amazing stuff. There was one guy who came as the man with two heads. He built a second head that he wore on his shoulder, and he could make it talk.
Wow.
He could make the head talk. And so that was cool. And then a guy came as a satyr, half goat, half man. But what he did was how the goat's legs kind of go backwards, like at the knee. And from the ground up to where that bend happens was a stilt. So this guy is dressed as a satyr, and he's like 7.5 feet tall.
Oh my God.
Okay. It was just amazing. I said, oh, that guy's got to win. Well, as much as I pushed, there was another person who took first, but I managed to make sure he got second. But the Halloween shows were just amazing. People were just out of their minds. It was just wonderful. And that was a cool thing. I had a lot of fun doing that.
I know one thing, you guys came back off the road at one point. You had been out for so long. You hadn't played Boston in a while, right? So I think your manager at the time was trying to say, hey, we got to get our name back out there. You even did a couple of support gigs, opening for some of the other Boston bands that were huge at the time, the Neighborhoods, who I know you're still friends with, Robert Lee and the Chartbusters. In the interim, at this point, you're also writing what became your biggest song, Lonely Hearts, right? So I know there was you had a position change and your drummer changed, but Lonely Hearts came into play here. It was one of your songs, I believe, that you kind of were working on. Kind of tell us how the Lonely Hearts came to be, and then that just completely catapulted you guys.
Yeah, the Lonely Hearts was the hardest song we ever worked on. We worked on that diligently. We had 3 different versions of it at one point. We demoed 2 versions of it. And then we recorded the version that you hear. We were unable, MCA had dropped us, so we were unable to get another deal right away. So we decided to put it out ourselves. So we pressed 3,000 copies of it and had a really nice cardboard cover done for the 45. And it really was Hail Mary pass in some ways, because we were looking at, as you said, we had been off the road a long time. We had replaced our drummer. We had written a bunch of new songs. So we were out of commission for like 3 months. And in that time, the Neighborhoods and a lot of Stoppers and a lot of other bands really broke through big. So there was a lot of competition. When Lonely Hearts came out,
1980.
Carter Allen.
I think
I beg your pardon?
I think it was 1980 you got Lonely Hearts.
Yes, it was. And when it came out, we right before it was released, we played a gig with Robin Lane and the Chartbusters opening for them at the main act in Lynn. And, we went out and I remember that night because we got 5 separate encores. And Carter Allen was there, and he had just started working for BCN. And he came up to me and said, well, you guys are great, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, we got a new record here. And he took it back to BCN. He fell in love with Lonely Hearts, and he really championed that song at BCN. And the song, once they started playing it, it was like nothing I've ever experienced. It was visceral. It just exploded. I mean, people just loved it. And to this day, I'm shocked we never spun another major label deal off of the success of that. But
yeah, that blows my mind, man. Lonely Hearts, again, that's, to me, it's like one of the all-time best top 5 songs ever to come out of Boston. I mean, it's such an iconic song, and it got so much airplay. And for a local band with no record deal, I mean, it went on, I think you told me, it was like 6 months in the top 3 on BCN. It was a local band on a 50,000 watt station, and that song was played. Oh my God! I remember I went to school in Northeastern in '84, and it was played all the time, even after you guys had broken up. It was always on the radio, and it's such an amazing, iconic song. And yeah, it is amazing. They spawned another deal for you guys. That's incredible. That song still today is an incredible song.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I'm amazed too. And it still gets played today. It's still getting played today. So I'm just appreciative of the fact that I got to be part of something like that.
That's a good thing.
And I guess you have a hard time at this point trying to get a deal. I know there's a manager swap out. You're trying to fire your manager. That led to some loss. But it was dragged on. This is another typical record label, record industry story, right? But you did get out through that, and you were looking for new management, a new label. You did get some help from another manager in New York, and you had some
Steve Paul.
Recorded, and then you ended up just doing your own thing and released them on your own down the road.
Yeah, well, what happened was we had released, following Lonely Hearts, we released several songs ourselves. Weekend and Pop Shivers and Wrong Number. And they were all very successful, but we just weren't getting another deal. Eventually in 1983, that's what led to us breaking up. We had run our race, so you did play your last show at the Channel, which turned out to be an absolute mob scene. But I think at the point you guys had decided that was going to be it, right? But there was no real fanfare to announce it until you decided to put an ad in the Phoenix, which is also another big part of the music scene back then. So just tell me about how that led up to your final show and what you did for the Phoenix. Well, yeah, we didn't tell anybody we were breaking up. We went into, the week before the show, the Channel knew it was going to be our last show. But the week before the show, we took a huge, like a quarter-page ad out in the Phoenix with our picture, and it just said, "Thanks, Boston, it's been great," and it just said the last show of the Atlantics. The response was like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, the Channel was fuller than I've ever seen it. It was so full that the dressing rooms were across the club, and we couldn't walk through the crowd. We had to leave the club, go outside, walk around the building, and in the load-in doors to get into the stage. Yeah. It was just remarkable. It was a fantastic night. We had a great show. We did several encores. We played basically every song we knew. And that was that, and it was sad. It was very sad. But again, we had been 3 years without a record deal, and we had several hits. And who knows why, but we never managed to land another deal, and that's the end of that. But
I guess the good news is the songs did eventually come out. 2006, you guys ended up doing it and released it yourself. It's a really great record called The Atlantics. And then also, another thing I was intrigued by, you mentioned it almost sparked a reunion. Talk about that for a bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not many people know this. I mean, only people that we have chosen to share it with. But in 2006, we decided to release an album of all the material you couldn't buy. And we put Lonely Hearts on it, obviously, but songs like Weekend and Pop Shivers and Wrong Number and, other songs were just released to the radio. They weren't available for sale. So we decided to release an album and just have all those songs on it. So for everybody who was interested. And we floated the idea at that time of doing a reunion, 3 reunion shows to promote it. And remarkably, everybody in the band agreed that we should do that. Now, our bass player, Bruce Wilkinson, had died at that point. But the rest of us were into doing it. So we actually got together at the Jam Spot in Somerville. And we walked into the room, we set up. Paul, our drummer, counted down Weekend, and it was like we had just stopped the week before. It was unbelievable. It was just like bang, and it was all right there.
That's what.
And then, and then what ended up happening, unfortunately, was Paul was scheduled to go out on the road with Joe Perry to Europe and then in the States to promote a new album Joe Perry did that Paul co-produced and played on. And when Paul got back, shortly after he got back, he died. And that just kind of sunk the whole project. And we just said, no, we're not going to do it. We're already down one guy. We're not going to do it this way.
You don't want to tarnish of the Atlantics for sure. Such an iconic band here. But you do on occasion break out the Big City Rockers. So on a special occasion, maybe a half dozen times over the years, you have gotten the guys together, played played Atlantic songs, and it's a lot of fun to play those songs again and see that people still do appreciate those songs for sure.
Yeah. On that note, we're just about time up, but it's been very interesting. I really enjoyed this history from the past very much. And I always liked the Atlantics. When I first ever heard them, I says, that's the number 1 band out of Boston. There's no messing around. This is before any of the... And then when you're talking about you were down in the scene with CBGBs, but you guys created the scene up here, or helped to create the major scene up here in Boston because of what you were doing at the time and how you achieved stuff. So on this note, I'm going to, it's just about time finished. If you want to say, you do have a website, right?
No.
I thought
you know what you could do? My band, Little Billy Lost, has a Facebook page. So
that's good.
The band I'm in now.
Well,
I did want to, before you did wrap it up, Diggy, if I wanted to mention that, a couple quick things, within the hour here, but yeah, we actually nominated and joined the New England Music Hall of Fame in 2023, which is a great honor. They didn't all stop playing music after the Atlantics broke up. Obviously, I know Ball and Pivot came out of that, out of the Atlantics fold. Fred's been playing music off and on in several Boston bands. The Simploids, the Kenmores, you might remember them, and also, like I said, he's doing the Big City Rockers. But he's also had his own band, Little Billy Lost, for the past 10 years. And they are active. They still play out. They still write. I would say definitely look into that band if you're out there. And just one of the final point about Lonely Hearts. I did find the list that the Herald put out in 2015, which it was like the Boston 101, like the 101st best songs of Boston. And they had Lonely Hearts ranked at number 20, which I would certainly fight them on because I think it's the top 5 songs. But I want to get off the phone without saying, how much the Atlantics are missed, how great they were. And, how Fred is still active out there today. So I want to make sure that gets out there before we close the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to you both. And Dinky, your kind words, I coming from you, that really means something, my friend. I appreciate it.
Well, you created something that's very special in an era that was very special. And you brought it from the 70s into the 80s with gusto through all those 19-odd dates you did at the channel in the first few years it opened. And you got recognition more and more on the club scene because of that. And not only that, the way that Boston has loved every bit of music that you've had is the scene creator. The scene creator, which is what always works in this world. And once it's created, people will jump on it left and right, and that's what they did with the Atlantics and stuff. Well, I much appreciate this, Fred, and I want to thank you. We got so much to say now before that.
No, I just wanted to thank you. I just, I love doing this with you both, and again, Dinky, to me, you're a rock legend as well, and I appreciate your kind words, and again, I really, coming from you, that really means something to me.
Well, we're all in this together, so it's a matter of letting people know that everyone's still here so far and done the best with what they've got. And I really much appreciate this, Fred, from the Atlantics and all the new bands that you're in and involved with, and Sean. And I want to say, this is 2 pints in a Dinky. This is 2 pints in a corner, closing out.